So Emilia Pérez seems to be the kind of movie that's just making nobody happy this year, except for the critics who just awarded it 4 Golden Globes, including Best Musical or Comedy, beating out Wicked. And it continues to rack up nominations throughout this award season. But there's been significant backlash from both Mexican audiences and also LGBTQ plus communities. So what's going on with this movie and how has it become one of the most polarizing of the award show season? Let's break it all down. So when Emilia Pérez first premiered at Cannes, it was really quickly the critics' darling of the festival circuit. Critics called it daring, avant-garde, and unlike anything they'd ever seen before, and it even won a whole bunch of prizes along the way. It was pretty clear from the beginning that this movie was going to dominate the award show season, even though most people hadn't really heard about it. That's because it wasn't widely available, but as soon as Netflix got the rights for it and general audiences got to watch it, the reception really quickly began to shift. Last I checked, it was sitting at about a 76% critic score on Rotten Tomato and only about a 68% popcorn score. And that's not even going into the reception on Letterboxd. So the movie isn't only ruffling feathers because of how different it is. I mean, it is a crime opera musical with strange and bizarre musical numbers, including the one that's gone viral. But it's also because of how the communities depicted in the movie feel they're being represented. So I think we need to go into my non-spoiler summary of Emilia Pérez right now because you'll need to know that to go into the reasons why people are upset. So basically, the head of a drug cartel kidnaps an attorney to help them transition into a woman. It's really unclear why she needed help from a lawyer about this, but you know what? That's how things get going. That's how part 1 kicks off. So some of the biggest criticisms about this movie are coming from both the Mexican and trans communities. So let's start off with what Mexican critics are saying. They're saying this movie is extremely disrespectful to Mexico and to the humanitarian crisis that's called by these cartels every day, in which thousands of people are affected every single year. It also doesn't help that the director is on record saying that he didn't really feel the need to do any research about Mexico for this movie, and that the casting director also said that the reason why there is only one Mexican actress in the whole movie is because they couldn't find any good Mexican actresses. And the fact that it keeps getting recognized by all of these award shows is just further salt in the wound. And they're not alone either. People from the trans community are also criticizing this movie, saying that it is one-dimensional, and with groups like GLAAD even going as far as saying that it's a step back for trans representation. Some of the biggest issues are how the transition is even depicted. I already mentioned that viral song that everybody's already heard at this point, but it's also the fact that the transition is shown as a singular magical event. If you listen to any trans person, you would know that transitioning is a lot more complicated and that not all trans people even feel the need to medically transition. And if they do, it takes a lot longer than one magical surgery. There's also the issue of Emilia Pérez's character in general, and I don't know how else to say this, but Emilia Pérez is a terrible person. She is personally responsible for the murder, death, torture, and who knows what else of countless victims. But the movie wants you to think that as soon as she transitions, she's absolved of all of those crimes. And they even want you to feel sympathy towards her. Now, she does eventually try to go and make up for her crimes, but the one-dimensional way that it's treated is what's really getting critics upset. And as a side note, I feel I need to over-explain myself here because I've talked about this before and people have misunderstood. The trans critics aren't saying that they're mad that Emilia Pérez is a bad person. They're mad that Emilia Pérez is a bad person who's absolved when she transitions. That's a very different thing. Transitioning doesn't make you a good person. That's a very reductive way of looking at it. And the final issue, and this has some light spoilers for Emilia Pérez, is that there's, and I don't know how else to say this, a Mrs. Doubtfire plotline where Emilia Pérez is basically gaslighting her wife and kids to spending time with her as a woman. Again, conflating transness with deception. So any way you try to look at this, this movie isn't making people happy unless you're a critic. Personally, I went into it not knowing any of this backlash, and I was already turned off by a lot of the things that the critics are now bringing up. And I do think these issues do affect the quality of a movie. I have people trying to argue with me saying that a movie doesn't need to be woke and perfect in order to be a good movie, and that's not the issue here. If a movie fundamentally cannot represent the topics and issues that it's talking about, then that's a failure of the movie. And you know what? That's a shame, because the direction of this movie was actually pretty interesting until just the plot distracted from everything. But I don't think the Golden Globes are going to be the last we hear of Emilia Pérez. I think it's going to definitely continue to rack up awards throughout this award show season, and might even end up being known as the crash of our generation. But let me know your thoughts. Did Emilia Pérez deserve the Golden Globe? Does it deserve this backlash? Would you have preferred Wicked or another movie? Let me know your thoughts in comments below.